Aloha from the East West Center in Honolulu, and mahalo to viewers around the world for tuning in to today's Gals with Lake Global webinar, Investment and Change for Minority and Women-Owned Businesses. Gals with Lake Global leverages the center's unique access to the world's policymakers, entrepreneurs, community leaders, and artists, virtually uniting these global forces with Hawaii's women leaders to harness their collective experience, ambition, and passion. Gals with Lake Global is intentionally dynamic and interactive. We will begin with our keynote panel, followed by 30 minutes of Q&A. Open space will follow Q&A as an optional opportunity for attendees to meet the speakers at virtual roundtables and participate in an unmoderated and informal dialogue for 10 minutes. Open space is a unique opportunity to engage and network as peers with our esteemed speakers and your fellow attendees. We encourage our audience to participate in and take advantage of the access open space provides. My name is Sarah Lamb, and I am the Gals Lake Global Co-Coordinator. It's my pleasure to introduce the experts, investors, and business leaders who will be discussing the challenges faced and the supportive measures needed by minority and women-owned businesses, as well as offering insights on ways to expand professional networks and access more diverse financing. Ms. Pocket Sun is co-founder and managing partner at SoGal Ventures, a venture capital firm investing in women and diverse entrepreneurs in North America and Asia. She's also co-president of the SoGal Foundation, a New York headquartered nonprofit that provides grassroots communities, education, and access to women and minority founders in 50 plus cities around 6 continents. Ms. Anna Gunther is the co-founder and chief bubble blower of PledgeMe, the first licensed equity crowdfunding platform in New Zealand and one of the first in Australia. Since launching, over 1,500 creative, community, and entrepreneurial campaigns have raised over $60 million through the crowdfunding platform. Ms. Shruti Bharat is interim CEO at AllRaise, a nonprofit dedicated to achieving gender equity among founders in tech. She's also the founder of FutureMap, a workforce development organization that supports first-generation college students in the transition from college to career. Finally, Ms. Marla Momi Music is the Business Development Manager at the YWC Oahu MBDA Enterprising Women of Color Business Center, where she ensures the strategic deployment of services and resources for women of color entrepreneurs looking to expand their capabilities and grow their business endeavors. And now I would like to take a moment to share our webinar protocols. Today's keynote panel is on the record recorded and will be made available on YouTube for viewing and sharing. Each panelist will speak for up to 7 minutes. Viewers, your microphones and videos are turned off during the keynote. If you are experiencing difficulties with internet connectivity, AirMeet provides a low definition option at the bottom right of your screen. For the best attendee experience, please connect to AirMeet using the most up-to-date version of a Chrome browser. The webinar is also accessible through AirMeet's mobile app, available to download to iPhone or any iPhone or Android device. Q&A will take place after panelists' remarks. To submit a question, you may either virtually raise your hand using the hand icon or use the Q&A function at the right of your screen. In either case, please specify which panelist you wish to answer. If you don't have a question of your own, you can also like a question asked by a fellow attendee. Questions with the most likes will be prioritized. Once Q&A concludes, viewers will have the option to meet the speakers by taking a seat at any virtual roundtable of your choosing and participating in an unmoderated interactive discussion. We encourage you to share the space and your voice. Also join the conversation on Twitter using hashtag GalsWithLay and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EWC Seminars. Finally, I'm delighted to introduce today's moderator, Ms. Ayanna Freeman. Ayanna Freeman is the owner and CEO of Ayanna Denise Limited Co., an award-winning complexion-inclusive, all-natural body care products and skincare service business based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She is also a member of the Black Investment Fund Steering Committee and is a Changing Faces Seminar alum. With that, I'll hand over the program to our moderator to offer brief contextualizing remarks. Ayanna? Ayanna, you're muted.
That's the one thing we always forget to do. Hello, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Sarah, for such a beautiful introduction so that everyone knows a little bit about me. I am super excited to hear what all of our presenters have to say tonight. as an entrepreneur, we are always in the mind frame of learning, or we always should be. There's always so much to learn about raising money and funding and connection and business relationships. And so, the biggest thing I am really looking forward to is learning things that I never even thought possible from these ladies who are across a few continents. So I'm really looking forward to that. And as Sarah said before, my name is Ayana Freeman, and I own Ayana Denise Skin, which is based out of New Mexico. And I help heal people's skin from all over with virtual consultations, or if they're here in New Mexico. And so I have a lot to learn as well as an entrepreneur. I am also an alumni of Changing Faces. So that's my biggest claim to fame, actually, because Changing Faces has really took my business from thinking single mindedly about a lot of things to just thinking about community and also how to think best for all of my shareholders that are part of my company. So I look forward to what everyone has to say here tonight. I do have a few questions of my own because I've researched these ladies and I have some digging to do on you guys. So I promise it won't be too tough at all. But I definitely wanted to make sure you understood how excited I was to also get to chat with you tonight. So I would like to definitely start with a couple of questions. Um, I'm going to go in order because Pocket Sun is going to be our first presenter tonight. And as Sarah said as well, please put questions in the Q&A. I have plenty of questions, but I know you have a question as well that you would like to ask these ladies. And so, what we're going to do is start with Pocket Sun. If you have a question for Pocket Sun, please do put it in the chat, and then the rest of you can vote on what question you want to hear. Or if you have a question yourself, go ahead and ask it. But one interesting thing I learned about Pocket Sun is that she started SoGal Ventures when she was in grad school. How many of us actually started companies while we were still supposed to be focused on our studies? So that's pretty like hardcore that you were able to do this while you were in grad school, no doubt. And I don't think any grad school is really simple. For anyone to just fly through. So I know that took a lot of time and concentration and effort on your part. So let's go into Pocket Sun. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Glad to be here and share my learnings. And so today I will be talking about the state of women and minority-owned businesses in Asia Pacific. But by way of an introduction, I am a co-founder and managing partner at SoGal Ventures. We are the first women-led next-generation venture capital firm backing women and diverse entrepreneurs across North America and Asia. So I recently moved to Vancouver, but previously I lived in Singapore for 6 years. And I also grew up in China until I was 18. So let's get into it. I want to share some research and data to set the stage about women entrepreneurship in Asia. So while Asian women have made considerable gains in education, for example, in China, there are more women graduates in college than men. But this has not really translated sufficiently into opportunities offered by employment and entrepreneurship. And women largely still are ingrained in poverty and face lower economic opportunities all over Asia. And in Asia Pacific, women actually spend between 60 to 84% of their time doing unpaid housework. And 1%, only 1% of global procurement actually goes to women-owned businesses. And that should be, shocking, but not surprised to everyone. And if women entrepreneurs are able to receive as much support as male entrepreneurs, the global economy could experience up to a $5 trillion boost. In Southeast Asia alone, there are 61 million women entrepreneurs. I spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia and have a special bond to women entrepreneurs and investors there. According to HSBC's survey, 58% of women entrepreneurs are concerned about gender bias when they're raising capital. 61% of women surveyed said that they had to pitch for capital in front of a group of investors solely or predominantly made up of men. And in these fundraising conversations, I'm sure many of you have heard men are more likely to be asked promotional questions focused on potential gains, whereas women are more likely to be asked preventative questions focused on potential losses and risk mitigation. And Harvard Business Review actually reports that entrepreneurs who address promotional questions raised at least 6 times more money than those who were asked preventative questions. And on average, women globally put about 151,000 US dollars of their own money into their businesses. In Asia, though, in Hong Kong, mainland China, and Singapore, the numbers are actually significantly higher than this average number. And I think this might have something to do with the fact that women entrepreneurs in Asia might be even less likely to get financial support from friends and family, and they might have to just put up more of their capital. And this creates a higher barrier for women to enter entrepreneurship in the first place. And women entrepreneurs are also most likely to be denied funding in Hong Kong and Singapore, and are most likely to be successful in the US and France, according to the research that I found. From my own observation from growing up in China for 18 years and living in Asia for 6, I think 3 important things we want to pay attention to are: 1, lack of institutional support. This is from governments, pension funds, etc., to really put money behind women entrepreneurs. This has been lacking. And in China, for example, where I grew up, it's been 6 years since I started SoGal, and the entrepreneur scene there is growing like crazy. It's wild, but still, there's no really like a SoGal competition in China. There's no fund in China that's really investing explicitly in women. And secondly, in Asia broadly, there is a lack of statistics to keep stakeholders accountable. The percentage of women entrepreneurs, the percentage of VCs that are women, the percentage of VC funding going to women and diverse entrepreneurs, or the percentage of assets managed by women managers. There is a big blank in these numbers. Number 3, I think it's worth noting that women's success is very much class differentiated. A lot of women's success in Asia is based on the low-paying work of other women of a different class. Okay, how much time do I still have?
You have 1 minute left.
Okay, 1 minute left. All right, I better talk about SoGal then. So a brief overview of what we do at SoGal for women. So SoGal is a venture capital firm investing in women entrepreneurs early stage, and we believe in women being the largest investment arbitrage opportunity of our time. And we aim to deliver superior financial returns by investing in world-class underestimated women founders. And since the inception in 2017, we have built a track record of picking over $1 billion category leaders from seed stage, and have built a global brand as a very strong ally for our entrepreneurs and a strong network in our core sectors, which includes consumer tech, health and wellness, and the future of work. And 100% of our Fund 1 investments are in women and minority-owned businesses. We invested in 42 companies across US, Canada, China, Australia, Singapore, and Sweden. And of the 42, 38 are women co-founders, 35 are women CEOs, 14 are people of color, and 16 became parents with young children or are expecting just in the past 2 years. So really exciting times for women, and we are seeing that women with children, pregnant founders, are actually performing extremely well. So I will end with that. SoGal is a global network for women entrepreneurs with over 100,000 reach, 50 chapters in 6 continents. And we open our arms if you want to join us. We also offer training for women to become investors down the road. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pocket Sun. Um, I don't know if everyone got this like I did, but Pocket Sun seems like she's not just pretty amazing, but I was like, you did what? When did you do that? And how did you get all this done? Um, you have been very impressive in your career because you seem to have such a strong voice across Asia. So when you talk about how women entrepreneurs aren't really backed very strongly, I find it absolutely amazing that you were able to have such power and influence across the continent. You were on Young Forbes Asia, LinkedIn Top 10 Voices, BBC, CNBC, like the list just goes on and on. And one question that I would love to ask you is what key moves have you made throughout your life that made you so influential?
I think being influential is a byproduct when you have a strong stance, when you
Mhm.
are doing something different and you're not afraid to be vocal about it. So when I started SoGal in the end of 2014, mid 2015, we had the idea to invest in women and start a fund, and that was a wild idea. And it was before it became trendy. It was before women jumped out of their VC firms and started their own shops. So we were there first, and we had to wave the flag. We had to try extra hard to educate the market. So I was actually terrible at public speaking. I was so scared of public speaking, but because, I had to talk to people about this, they need to know that only 2.2% of funding goes to women entrepreneurs, and that needs to change. So I had to use my voice, and I was able to use my personal story and my conviction to get a lot of early on attention, which was very fortunate and helped us be able to raise a fund. And we're not now launching a major second fund, which is super exciting.
That is extremely exciting. I am looking forward to seeing it. I have been connected to SoGal for about I think a year. It was like during the pandemic, and then I got connected with SoGal, and I always appreciate the information you all put out and the training. Possibilities that you have. So, if anyone is not connected to SoGal, I really do suggest that you go ahead and get connected. I believe that we put the link for SoGal in chat, and if not, maybe we can get it up there so other people can connect with SoGal. That would be great. And we do have a question from the audience. Is there any form or effort in legislation in your country to start supporting women in business? That is an amazing question from, I believe it's Luel Jean Lorzano. I hope I did a good job pronouncing your name, and that is an excellent question. So, Pakistan, can you answer that?
Um, yes, so it depends on what is my country, right? So I'm a Chinese citizen. I'll start there.
Okay.
So in China, there I don't think there's real like legislation around women and entrepreneurship specifically. There is more of an Equal Employment Act around China, and I think China has a really good foundation of working women. And actually, there's a piece of fact I collected. So 92% of women who were married between like 1966 and 1967 were employed. So ever since the Communist Party's revolution in 1949, there is a dramatic influx of women working. So my generation all grew up with moms who worked, and that was the norm. So I think that plays a big role in shaping people's perception about women and work. And China actually has the largest share of self-made female billionaires as well. In Singapore, I think the government and business are more closely intertwined, and it's a smaller ecosystem. So I know for a fact that the Singaporean government has been working very hard to increase the entrepreneurship and innovation spirit in Singapore. So there have been a lot more initiatives that involve women. No specific legislation I've seen about funding women entrepreneurs, but more like spotlighting women who are doing well. Like I was fortunate to be on the 100 Women in Tech in Singapore, which is kind of a government, university, business world all combined, like putting together some initiatives like that. So yeah, I hope these countries in Asia and beyond Asia all start to put out more legislation that really put money behind women and women fund managers as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Pocket Sun. Okay, so our next presenter is Anna Gunther, who is in Boston, I believe. I say that, but excuse me, New Zealand. I'm sorry about that. You have history in Boston. So sometimes I put that in there, mixing it up with where you are currently. Thank you so much for joining us, Anna, who is the CEO of Pledge Me, which was the first crowdfunding platform in New Zealand. Oh, that's a huge deal. And I'm sure you ran up with just a lot of obstacles in that space because of us. So I can't wait to hear all about it. Anna, take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Kia koto no otipotioho ko Anna tokungwa na mihi nui kia koto. My name is Anna and I come from New Zealand / America, so I'm just very confused. But I want to talk a little bit about New Zealand first before I get into the rest of my talk. And I was asked to share a little bit about New Zealand. We have some amazingly powerful women in this country. I don't know if you've heard of Jacinda Ardern, but she is pretty much showing the world how to lead with kindness. But it's not just her at the top. We also have our first Indigenous Governor General was appointed this year. So pretty much the two most powerful political positions in our country are led by women. Unfortunately, that hasn't really translated into the business space. 4 of our top organizations, including the police, are 93% male, 100% over the age of 45, and 100% white. And that's not just people that I can point to, but for a while there, it was my board as well. I, for some reason, thought when I was creating a board of directors that I should appoint some men in suits to make me look more like I was a business person. It is reflected as well throughout business. They say that only 18% of senior leaders in business are women in New Zealand, and 56% of countries don't have any senior leaders that are women. And that's amazing to think when 2 of the most powerful people in the country are women. It extends not just from general business, where around 33% of companies are majority led by women, but actually our exporters are half that. So actually the way to bring money into the economy is predominantly male. I think part of the problem, though, is women seeing themselves and the ability to get into business. I was pretty lucky. I always saw business around me when I was growing up, whether it was my granddad, who started his first company when he was 15. He left high school and threw his books under a bush and put his name down to buy a tractor, through to my auntie, who owned a chain of restaurants throughout New Zealand. And it wasn't just my family, it was also my friends. I started my first business in high school with a bunch of my teenage friends. I am the worst looking person in that photo. But we decided to make a lip gloss company together, which was literally just Vaseline and vanilla essence mixed up and put into tiny little bottles. And I actually didn't get into business first up out of high school. I went through university and just studied the things I loved. Sort of got stuck in different jobs. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that I thought maybe I'd want to get back into business. And I actually started by going back and studying. And I did a master's of entrepreneurship through the University of Otago. And my master's thesis was my business. And it wasn't quite this bad, but I learned that you just had to get started in business, just make something happen. And the first version of Pledge Me was horrible. I'm surprised that anyone put their credit card details into the platform. But the thing that I learned is you have to love the problem you're solving more than the solution you've created. because what you create is going to change over time as people start using it. But you just have to really care about the thing that you're doing. And for us, that was helping Kiwis fund the things they care about. So making access to funding more equitable in our country and having it actually represent the diversity of the country that we live in. So what is crowdfunding? It really is as simple as it sounds. You go out to your crowd for funding. You set a goal of how much money you want to raise, a deadline in which you want to raise it by, and you offer something in return. So there's 3 types of crowdfunding, at least that we've seen. One is project-based crowdfunding. That's like a Kickstarter where you offer a reward in return for pledges or different rewards. Then there's equity-based crowdfunding where you offer shares in your company, so ownership out to your crowd. And then the third type is lending-based crowdfunding, where you actually issue a loan note to your crowd and repay the interest to them as well as the principal. Sort of like borrowing from the bank, but except you're borrowing from your people. We've had over 1,600 successful campaigns through the platform so far, and it's everything you can think of and not think of. Everything from a man who wanted to create a bionic hand for his friend, cost $5,000, $1,000 per finger, through to a woman who was teaching yoga in prisons, and she wanted to publish a manual so other prisons could do the same thing. And she not only raised the money that she needed, but she started getting yoga mats sent into her. And New Zealand's pretty cool. It's the first country in the world that actually changed its legislation to allow equity-based crowdfunding, to make it as simple as possible for people to invest in the companies that they knew at an earlier stage than when they'd like go and list on the stock exchange, which means they're already big. It's a really young industry because it's only been around for 6-7 years and legal in New Zealand, equity crowdfunding. But it's also young in terms of the people that are using it. We actually hosted the world's youngest equity crowdfunder, Indy Griffiths, who at 18 couldn't get money from anyone. The banks wouldn't lend him money. Typical investors like, who's this kid? And the people that were following him on Twitter, though, got really excited. And they're like, yeah, we're going to invest in this kid who's built this product that his mom, specifically for his mom, it was a platform to book parent-teacher conferences. But he started getting through all the schools because his mom was a teacher. But it's also growing. And I think the thing that excites me the most is some of the campaigns that have been the most successful through our platform are the ones that would never have gotten funding traditionally. So one of the few campaigns that's ever made me cry was for a group of entrepreneurs in Gisborne, up in the North Island of New Zealand, which has the highest rate of Indigenous people, the highest rate of unemployment, and the highest rate of youth suicide. And this group of entrepreneurs decided to create a medical cannabis company and employ their young people and give them hope. And instead of going through the traditional paths of raising investment, they went out to all the local meeting houses of the local Indigenous people to talk about their goals and what they wanted to do. And everyone told them it was going to be hard, that they'd never make their goal, that they should go and get money from the bankers. And they decided they really wanted to do this, so much so that they were going out to people that didn't have access to the internet or computers, and they had paper pledging packs so they could fill out their $50 pledge and send it in the mail through to us. And they actually raised their goal of $2 million in 10 minutes through the platform. $2 million is the legal maximum you can raise in New Zealand. And it took our platform down. But I think it showed the power of the community and the power of that message of giving young people hope. But it's also diversifying. I think we've already heard the numbers of how hard it is for women to raise investment. But what we're seeing through crowdfunding is it's democratizing not only who's funding, so more women investors are coming through, but also who's getting funded. About 50% of our campaigns have female leaders and 40% have female CEOs. And one example of this is Deanna Yang, who started a milk and cookie cafe. And when her landlord decided to triple her rent, she decided to go out and raise money from her crowd to buy a bus and take the cookies to the people and to stop having the cafe in that location. And she managed to raise almost double what she needed. It was over $90,000, I believe, through a community who really wanted her cookies and really loved what she was doing. And it's also graying. It's not just young people that are raising money through crowdfunding. Our oldest campaigner was in his 70s when he went out to his crowd. He didn't even know what Facebook was. So that's a little bit about crowdfunding. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Anna. That, I think I almost shed a tear, especially when you talked about the cannabis company. So thank you so much for sharing that and inspiring so many people who are on here today. Okay, so I am going to come to Ms. Shruti, who is the CEO of All Raise. And I'm very excited to hear from you, Shruti, because I have been involved with We When Founder Met Funder.
Love it.
So I have a lot to say about that. So I'm going to let you take it from here and hope everyone enjoys it.
Amazing. Also, just what a very global crowd. I was reflecting on how I'm the child of immigrants from India, and so much of that experience of growing up as a bit of an outsider has informed, I think, probably everyone's perspective on equity in this ecosystem. So that's just been fun to hear as well. So I'm Shruti Bharat. I'm the interim CEO here at All Raise. I joined to head up our venture programs, and I'm here to talk to you about All Raise's perspective on gender in the VC tech ecosystem in the US. So there have been a lot of news and headlines, and there's a lot of firsts happening for women in the United States. Actually, I was just looking at this, 25 new female-led unicorns already this year. That's more than double of all 2020. And we also see an increase in funding to Black-founded companies. I think this is really encouraging news when you look at the increase. But unfortunately, what All Raise is also looking into is that proportionally, this is not necessarily an increase in proportion going to women and to minorities. So here, PitchBook data shows that, sure, there's been an increase to about 15.6% going to female co-founded companies with a male founder, but only 2%, as Pocket also mentioned, is going to solo female founders, and an abysmal, 0.34% goes to Black women. And so I think here it's clear that, yes, there are a lot of firsts, but there are also record-breaking numbers of VC firms just investing generally. And so I think in order to really overcome the barrier, we need to double down and accelerate, and that's not happening. So I also want to speak a little bit about gaps, where the gap actually is. We actually see that the huge failure rate getting from seed to Series A, and there's probably even more early in the pre-seed, but the data is really poor. It's not tracked. And so some of these IPOs and everything, you see that women are succeeding at the later stages, suggesting that perhaps women need more traction they need to prove themselves more to get to that. And so All Raise is starting to focus more on the early stages. I think I'd also just like to say, when you flip that statistic of 2%, what that says is 98% of all venture capital in the United States goes to teams with male founders on the founding team. And so I think there's been a lot of talk in the past few years about gender diversity, but we see these 4 kind of key challenges facing our female and non-binary entrepreneurs. And I think there is an analogy for minorities as well. The first one is that they cite being under-networked. And what does that mean? It's really the investors, the fellow founders, and the tech company operators that introduce you to your key investor, for example. So all of you have probably heard of, the Uber mafia, the Airbnb thing. I mean, it's all about who you know, especially driven by Silicon Valley. And so for our women that are outside of those core networks, it is so hard to break in. And in fact, it can be so discouraging to hear, oh, like VC is breaking records. And yet that's not really the experience of a lot of the founders that we work with. Imposter syndrome, loneliness, of course, when you're in a male-dominated industry and you keep getting told that your idea is not big enough, that really can damage even how you pitch, right? And your confidence. And there are also standards that are different. So we see a lot of bias in the investing process. A lot of, even just this year, I have heard of male partners that are hearing a female pitch saying, I don't really understand your idea. I might have to ask my wife. I mean, I thought that was in the 1950s. It's still happening. And so these are the 4 challenges. Always has some levers and perspectives on how to improve this, and I'll talk a little bit about each one. The first is to build community and overlapping networks among founders, funders, and operators. Community is so critical. I mean, communities like this one, the All Raise chapters are just you never know who will end up being that connection that is the differentiating opportunity in your life. And so our goal is to really connect our funder community and our founder community, as well as operator. The next is to increase the number of check writers who identify as women and minorities. The Kauffman Fellows have done research to show that women investors are 2 times more likely to invest in women founders than their male counterparts. So if we can push the number of women like Pocket up, then the theory of change is that you can also get more women funded. But that means we have to get beyond firsts, right? Because we all know that if you're the only woman in a firm, you may end up not wanting to be the only one pushing women forward. So I think we're at the stage where it's not enough to just have one. We need firms to commit to true diversity. And that goes to the third, which is addressing bias in the VC firms and the investing process. You know, of course, there's bias in the pitching process. There's also data from DocSend that shows that pre-seed investors spend 50% more time scrutinizing the traction section of an all-female pitch deck than male teams. So that's more time scrutinizing, and that means a higher bar that women have to clear than men. So I'll stop sharing here just to kind of say what we're doing about it. You know, we have founder boot camps, and also hoping to post that in the chat, but we have a free master class that's 15 hours of free classes taught by women founders, women funders. And that is just to demystify the fundraising process. It is free for anyone around the world. And our founder bootcamp alumni from 2021, so far they've raised 195 million in just 7 months. So we do think that we are able to bring the network together, create that community of support, and introduce them to key investors. We also are focused on engaging that check writer community. 84% of all female and non-binary check writers in the US are engaged in the All Raise community in some way. And so, you know, I think that's a testament to when you're able to build the network and the community, at that point, you start finding the change agents, the tipping point, and it becomes more and more acceptable to challenge the status quo. We're also placing women on boards. We have a program where over 25 placements of women or underrepresented minorities on private tech company boards. So overall, at the end of the day, you know, this ecosystem requires full transformation. It's all levers, but we believe that founders become funders who become operators. And at the end, you can't really change one thing. You have to address the whole thing, and community is at the center.
Thank you so much, Shruti, for all that wonderful information and the statistics as well. Just as a reminder, please put your questions in Q&A for us so we can ask it at the end. Okay, we're going to let Marla Momi Music take the floor, who is over the YWCA in Oahu. And this is a very impressive organization in the community, and I would love to hear all about it.
Thank you so much. I shared my screen for a second. Very happy to be here and to travel around the world and listen to the accomplishments of all of these women CEO and founders. What an extraordinary panel. It's been a pleasure to hear what you're doing to create equity in business. We're bringing you all back to Hawaii at at the Enterprising Women of Color Business Center. I'm the Business Development Manager. I think we're the newest business resource center, technical center in Hawaii. We were founded through a $1 million grant funded through the U.S. Department of Commerce Minority Business Development Agency. It's a 2-year grant. We've just started our 2nd year. It's one of 5 initiatives across the country. We can serve clients in Hawaii as well as across the U.S. We also can serve men and non-minorities, but our focus in our programming is minority women entrepreneurs. We launched our first certification training cohort November 2020, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And we're part of the YWC Oahu, one of 2 women's business centers. The other is the Patsy Teaming Business Center, Women's Business Center, which is funded by the Small Business Administration. And their focus is startup business. So from kitchen table idea to launch. And we're a little further down the stream, a business that has been in operation. The founder is working full-time in the business, and it's really seeking to grow. Just to step back and reiterate some of the statistics that some of the ladies here have also echoed, minority women-owned firms are the fastest growing in the country. Approximately 13 million women-owned businesses in the U.S. Amount to roughly 42% of all firms in the United States. Women-owned businesses are growing at the rate of 5%, and while that seems small, it's twice as fast as the growth rate of other firms. Women of color account for nearly 90% of the new women-owned businesses annually, and an estimated 1.9 trillion in revenue is produced by women-owned businesses. And while that all is wonderful gain, we still have much room to grow. Although minority-owned businesses are growing at a faster rate than non-minority firms, there is a large disparity in average gross receipts between minority female-owned firms and other groups of firms. So our programs are bucketed in 3 main areas: access to capital, business analysis, and market access. And as I had mentioned, we've launched with certification training. That's been our core program. We've completed 4 cohorts, and we have a total of 6 that we're producing through our 2-year grant period. The federal government sets aside approximately $126 billion annually in contracts, primarily for certified women-owned, minority-owned, and veteran-owned small businesses, including service disabled and other categories. There's an annual goal of 23% to small businesses in federal contracts, and our focus is certification training for the WOSB, Women-Owned Small Business, and EDWOSB, Economically Disadvantaged Women-Owned Small Business, and that set-aside goal is about 5%. In Hawaii, we have over 44,000 women-owned businesses that generate $7 billion in revenue, but at the last count, less than 30 were certified. So that would be about a total of 28 active certifications in the WOSB, EDWOSB space. This is the list of the national corporate certifications and federal certifications. And again, our training focuses on the women business enterprise and the women-owned small business. And what you'll learn in our certification training is how to gain access to government and corporate contracts, what certification programs can expand your business's opportunities, what documents are needed, how to market to grow your certified business, and small business management tips. As I said, this training is open to clients across the country, and it's all handled in Zoom. It is Hawaii time at 5:30 in the evening, and an interesting fact is that we've had quite a bit of signups from women businesses across the country, including on the East Coast, dialing in at 11 and 11:30 at night. So there's been a lot of interest in these pandemic times to look at other opportunities to pivot business, to seek ways to shore up business, to seek other kinds of contracting. We also offer business and financial counseling, including SWOT, marketing and social media counseling. And I'd like to introduce you to our counselors. Cami Chen here is highlighted, who will be in our open roundtable following this discussion, in case anyone is interested in understanding just what you'll access from our counselors, but they have a wealth of knowledge, and all of this programming is free. We cover business, financial, and marketing in a whole range of range of subjects, but ultimately we try to meet women businesses exactly where they are. And that's part of really being a technical center, in that every situation and every client has a different challenge, a different need. And ultimately, certification training has been a wonderful pathway to audit many businesses. And at the end of the day, sometimes it's really just the basics that businesses are seeking to understand, to improve on, to have a second pair of eyes help develop. We also provide marketing training, and our next certification cohort starts January 25th. We also participate in panels like this, workshops, and other community events. We partner with a whole range of business resource centers in Hawaii, and from my experience, it's been really gratifying knowing that there is a lot of free resources out there for women growing their businesses, and that it's a very collaborative community. So if we can't provide a service that is of interest to the client, we absolutely refer them out to some of our other resources. We've done a wealth of past programs on a whole diversity of subjects, including supplier diversity and procurement, mastering your business series with marketing, insurance, legal questions, the beginnings of exporting to Asia. Most of this is driven by hot topic interests of our own clients and just where they are in their business and how they would like to grow. We have some upcoming programs coming up this holiday season: insurance and bonds, impact marketing webinar, and again, our certification training. But we're going to be spending quite a bit of time in the new year discussing access to capital. And that can mean different things to different kinds of businesses. And we're partnering with Feed the Hunger, which is a CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution, based in Hawaii and California, and pairing just a general overview of the different vehicles for access for capital that our women business owners are interested to know about and to prepare for, along with one-on-one counseling sessions, so that they have an opportunity to really discuss their unique business needs. We have a very robust website with all kinds of resources for our business owners, including business certification, procurement resources, and a video library of a variety of the webinar and other kind of professional topics that we've covered, including piloting a client directory. And one of the nicest things about working in a new resource center is the network that it's begun to create for our various clients. So the first thing I think that has come up from clients is, how do we patron other women in business? How do I offer mentorship? How do I partner? And so the directory is the first step in building their own network to advance their business interests. And if there's any interest out there in participating in our programs, then please go to our website, fill out our intake form. And our goal is to really get to know our businesses well enough to be of service, not only to many of their various needs, but to refer them out into the business resource community in Hawaii and see them successfully gain certification if that's something that they are interested in pursuing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marla. That was loads of information for us to understand the type of programs that you all have available there at YWCA, and such great partnerships available for our types of women around the world. Thank you. Thank you for everybody, all the presenters that showed us something new today that we could learn from. We really appreciate your time. As a reminder, we're going to enter the Q&A session And I would love for you to get your last minute questions in to our audience. If you have any questions for any of our presenters, for Pocket Sun, for Anna Gunther, for Shruti, and also to Marla, please go ahead and put it in the Q&A now. If you see a question that you do like, go ahead and tick it so that it moves up to the top, because those are the first ones that I will start with. So I have had some burning questions, but I'll try to keep it like really fast. I was able to ask Pocket Sun a question earlier. So what I'm going to do is work a little bit backwards, and I'm going to start with Marla, because you all had so many programs, and I'm pretty sure during the lockdown, your meeting attendance and your creativity with what type of trainings you offered online did increase. Have you noticed how women have healed because you have these trainings available? So going from women not really knowing they can do certain things to now all of a sudden having the confidence in themselves to try certain things and start a business.
And that's our main role and focus. We stood up this center just right in the middle of the first peak of the pandemic, and so we didn't know what kind of participation we would see. But of course, and naturally, so many women entrepreneurs were pivoting, refocusing their current businesses in another direction, and we're looking for confidence about how do I analyze this, who do I reach out to network about the idea, what can I do to further, gain access to technical skills to develop my business. And it's been incredibly gratifying to see all of these businesses get grounded in new ideas, because one thing is for sure, it has been a very fruitful and creative time as well, because that's something that I can say with working with the bulk of our clients. It's, well, what's the next idea, and how do I make work what I'm doing? And it's been wonderful to be available to them as a resource and as a network to find a home and center these ideas around other experts and take the next steps in new directions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I can only imagine how that made you feel when you noticed that trend, especially during the pandemic, how you were helping so many women and that how they needed more of it. And you were like, all right, cool, I can do this, that, and the other. Thank you so much for letting us in on that information, Marla. Okay, I am going to Shruti. I have a question for you. As I mentioned earlier, I have been um, a good recipient of When Founder Met Funder, which is one of your many, and I really am not downplaying this, the many programs that you really do have available for women entrepreneurs. And my question for you is, how have you seen the women's comfort with discussing money to improve their ability to raise or create sustainable income?
That's really interesting. I think so. I think that there's number one, a recognition that like venture capital is not the only source of money out there if you want to achieve your goals. So to Anna's point, crowdfunding becoming more popular, or grants, or venture debt. I mean, there are a lot of different structures. So I think I've just heard more confidence, actually. So one of the women that participated in our programs, she's a Black woman founder. She told me that the pandemic has taught her to be more selective about her investors, to bootstrap as long as possible so that she retains more freedom and autonomy. And she's like, my goal is financial wealth creation for generations. And I just hear that a lot from the women in our community. So I do think money is a motivator, but there's also something larger about generational wealth, about freedom, and I don't know. It's definitely becoming more comfortable. And I'd also say I saw a question in there: how Always influences change in the ecosystem. And I thought of two things. One of them is FOMO. So the venture ecosystem is so, at least in the US, is so following trends, like they're always wanting to be in the hot deals. And we have used power and influence to make it seem like this is something you have to be doing. We highlight positive stories. We don't always focus on those gaps. We're also like, no, look, your peers are taking these commitments and making these changes. You should too. And no VC firm wants to be behind. But I'll also say the work is very small and day to day also. It's like when we have a panel, can we make sure it's a diverse group? When we are doing a board search, making sure the pipeline is truly diverse and trying to influence the CEO, or when someone asks us, hey, do you know any associates to hire for our firm? We will look through Black, Latinx, and Indigenous candidates and like take that extra moment. So I think it really comes down to small ways that we shape culture along the way, even though we have these big goals. It's like day-to-day work.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I hope everyone learned about that with money and just the conversation of money and the different aspects of it, and not be super intimidated with the discussion of how to get it, and the whole bootstrapping thing. I think a lot of women do think that they need, $500,000 just to get started. And it's like, well, just start where you are too. And it's okay to bootstrap it, like you mentioned. So thank you so much for that. One more question before we go into the Q&A. Get your last polls in for which questions you like the most, or get your last question in. I see a couple of them popping up. So Anna, who was in New Zealand and built this platform that I could just feel like some of the things you went against when doing this in New Zealand. But have you witnessed an increased success rate for women-owned businesses?
I think the cool thing is we've always seen women being successful through crowdfunding. It just seems like it's a way of coordinating and activating that makes sense. So it's pretty much been 50% since we started. I think partially that's also, it's a woman-led company. I believe, the only woman-led equity crowdfunding platform in the world. So I think people seeing us and naturally gravitating towards us as well means we get a higher percentage. The thing that I do find sad, though, is often women aim to raise less, and the valuations, so what their company is worth is less as well. And if anyone here is thinking about setting a valuation for their company, it really is a dark art. It's willing buyer, willing seller. So I think there's almost this sort of dampening down of how we value ourselves, as well as we try to do more with less. So that if I could change anything, it would be that.
And probably because we've always had to do more with less. We're we're always in that mind frame. We just work with what you have and make the most out of it, Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Anna. Okay. In the Q&A here, we've got some really good questions in here. Let's start with, on the top here, we have Robbie Adams, who is out of Boston City Hall. How about that? So this question is not directed specifically to someone, but let's see who wants to respond to this. Do you go to foundations for funding? I want to start my own nonprofit, so just not sure if that is a different path for me to go down looking for funding.
I can take that.
Okay,
Since I
Pakistan. Thank you.
started both a venture fund and a nonprofit, so I can speak to both worlds. So funding for nonprofits is different from funding for a for-profit startup company. So to start a nonprofit, I would say you probably should get grant money, donations, sponsorships. So find out who are the potential corporates that you can work with, who are the potential bigger foundations that give out grants to people who work on causes like yours. So we actually set up our foundation because we got a pretty generous donation from Kauffman Foundation, and also a Bitcoin millionaires charity foundation. So that actually prompted us to start the nonprofit, because starting a nonprofit is a pretty lengthy process. So you better have some war chest prepared for it. But I would also suggest that think of your nonprofit as an actual, revenue generating business. Think about, what are your key initiatives and programs that can sustain you on your own in the long term, because it's always better to not be dependent on other sources of funding other than sustaining your own.
Okay, thank you so much for answering that, Pocket Sun. All right, our next question up is from Kelly, who is at the East West Center, which is a great question here. To any of our speakers, what has been the biggest effect or change the pandemic has had on your business or your business strategy? What advice can you give to other MWOBs? I'm sorry, I am not familiar with that acronym, so please spell that out for me. For rising against those challenges.
I can speak to that a little bit. I think one thing that happened during the pandemic was a spotlight on the childcare challenge in the US and across the world. And I think that is actually an opportunity. I mean, I think that's a venture market for women that's just exploding now, and also women's health. I think the other thing that the pandemic did was it was just this focus on societal inequity. And in some ways, I think now is the time for women and minorities to spot those funds and companies that have made commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion and pursue them, right? I mean, next year, what we're going to look at is who is actually living up to all of those commitments. So my advice is there are initiatives out there. There's money that was spun up during the pandemic to solve these problems. And you want to make sure it's not just marketing, and pursue it and take that opportunity. So in some ways, I think this is it's an opportunistic time too.
Thank you so much, Ruthie. Does anyone else want to sort of give some insight on that with their company?
Yeah, quickly. COVID was hard. I don't know. I don't think it was the same in North America, but New Zealand and Australia just completely shut down. You couldn't see anyone, couldn't leave your houses fully, you couldn't do anything except go to the supermarket. And so we saw, at least as a platform, that everyone was scared of what was going to happen. And we went down to 5% of normal revenue. And that is something you never forecast in your cash flow. And I think the beautiful thing was the team that we have and the way that they got through it. And we were all used to working remotely. So things didn't change greatly being at home. But it was definitely a really, really tough time. So COVID was hard. And I feel for all of you as well.
I think that's the only word that anybody can say about COVID. It's it was hard. Something that we weren't necessarily used to. Thank you for those different point of references also, because if you're in one country, you experienced the pandemic in one way, and then another country or another city even experienced it a different way. So you can see what everyone had to deal with. Our next question is from Elizabeth. At Anna, this is for you specifically. You mentioned that New Zealand was the first country to allow equity crowdfunding. Has this spread to other countries? And if so, which ones?
Yeah, so New Zealand was the first country in the world to change its legislation specifically to support and allow it. It was already happening in the UK without it was working around the legislation, and they've since then changed it. But it's now available in the United States and Australia, in different countries. It just seems to be launching everywhere. And we're also licensed to provide it in Australia. So most countries, you have to get licensed by the regulators to provide it, because there's rules around how people pitch for investment and things like that.
Okay, perfect. Elizabeth, I hope that answered your question. Next up is Luel Jean Lozano, which is a question I asked a little bit earlier, but I know that she has a question for another country because I think Anna answered this in her country, but another country could step in on this. Is there any form of effort and legislation in your country to start supporting um, women in business? No legislation efforts. Well, I know Anna mentioned some in New Zealand, which is really great. All right, we will move on to let's see here. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a lot of questions coming in now. Give me a second. This is cute. Okay, we often talk about the barriers. What are the opportunities for women and minority-led businesses right now? So this is coming from one of our panelists, Anna Gunther, and she's asking about this question for not just in New Zealand, I'm sure, but just all across the globe. What are the great opportunities that are available that you all can speak on? Any panelists would like to answer that?
I can start. I
Thank
think
you,
the
Pocket
biggest
Sun.
Hi. I think the biggest opportunity is when women and other minority entrepreneurs really stand up for who you are, your upbringing, and how that enabled you to see pain points that others don't see. And trust me, there must be other big group of people who see, who experience the same pain points. And if you can solve problems for you and people like you, like every single one of those problems are billion-dollar companies themselves in the future. So that's what I'm really excited to fund. And also think one thing that COVID helped for women is it kind of eliminated the geographic barriers for women when it comes to fundraising. So we've seen our portfolio company who was in Milwaukee and had a hard time fundraising. Like once COVID hit, it's like, everyone is equal, and she could fundraise from her own home and get the same opportunities. So I thought that was incredible. And I mentioned many of our female founders got pregnant in the past few years, past 2 years mainly. So a lot of COVID babies. And with Zoom and Air Meets, like you can hide your pregnancy so well. So you don't really have to explain yourself about this anymore. And I also think it decreases the pressure and nervousness you will feel when you're actually standing in front of a room full of men, versus in virtual meetings. I think that pressure is much less when you are in the comfort of your own home.
That's very well said because I definitely was able to experience that during the pandemic. There was such a paradigm shift, but you had to like pay attention in order to really take advantage of it. So thank you so much for explaining that, Pocket Sun. Okay, we have time for one more question from our Q&A. And I am looking for a question that maybe one of our panelists has not really spoken too much on. Let's see here. Shruti, practically, how has All Raise worked to create this cultural and systematic change within venture capitals, companies, and other businesses? This is coming from Elizabeth.
Yeah, I think this is also linked to me into like business advice generally right now, which is that as a woman running a business, and I also am a founder, so I think about this more than I used to. I think we have choices. We don't have to go to VCs that don't have women in their firms. We don't have to put up with bias if in the pitch process. There are enough firms and VCs and other types of investors, angel groups, that are that wouldn't put you through that, right? So I think we're in a stage now where, and I actually spoke to a woman founder the other day, and she was like, I wrestle with, like, as a founder, my industry is so male dominated. What do I do about that? And I'm like, you as a founder have power, actually. And that power is to change who invests in you, who you work with. And so to me, that's inspiring and pretty like empowering. We don't have to work with anyone we don't want to, and we should keep that in mind, because the VC ecosystem is changing, and we don't have to. We can go with the change agents. There are enough of them out there.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Ruti. And that's really good to explain because it can be a bit overwhelming for people who are trying to get into funding because, as we've mentioned, a few of you all have mentioned the biases that women do have had to deal with in the past when trying to raise funds. And one of those, was stated very well about, a man will say, "Well, I have to talk to my wife about it," and it's like, wow, are we limiting the businesses just because you don't have a direct relationship to the product? So let's try to open those eyes and ears without it being specifically gender specific as far as how well a business can do, regardless of the fact that only your wife has experienced it or only you have experienced it. So thank you so much for explaining that. Okay, we have one more question. Let's see here. And I lost it because it changed. Hold on, give me 1 second. Let's see. It was from the US here. Here we go. From Debbie Saunders. She is the CEO of Wildlife Drones. I bet that's an amazing company there. Are there new opportunities in the US for securing funding post COVID from outside the US? Most of what I've heard is that you have to be in the country to get funded in the US. Thank you, Debbie, for that question. Would any of our panelists like to answer that? Okay. Securing funding post-COVID from outside the US. If anyone may think of something, just let me know. All right, so I will go to Luelle Jean Lozano, and she's asking, what top 3 advice would you like to impart women who are planning to start a business or just recently started? What do you want them to remember always? That's a great question.
Oh, I think my biggest thing is work with nice people. Like, if someone is treating you badly, it's not worth it. Whether it's an investor, a co-founder, whatever. Work with nice people.
I'd say build your community and your network. That is going to pay dividends. They will help fill in all the gaps and uncertainties that you will face on the journey. So invest in your relationships.
Yes, definitely find people who are just 1 to 2 steps ahead of you. These people will give you the best advice. I'd also say that make your preferences into rules. A lot of the times women tend to bend over to fit in, certain boxes that already exist out there, and we're trying to do the same thing and compete with others. But actually it's your business, like you should do it your own way. So think about how you can really solidify your preferences and strictly operate a business according to your own preferences. I think that's a really empowering thing to do.
And I would say just be authentic about not knowing and be okay with that. And that there are resources out there to help you and networks that you can plug into that will help build confidence and gain knowledge in ways that you will be contributing to.
Okay. Did anyone else have one more piece of advice? I mean, we can't have enough, but then I guess sometimes it's too many, huh? We can't remember all of it. All great advice, I must say. Let me just say one more time before I kick it over to Sarah. Um, every presenter had so much value tonight, and I could just feel it from the audience as well, from the Q&A, that people really do value your time, your expertise, and your talents tonight. Thank you so much for being here. And we are not done yet, though. I am just going to kick it off to Sarah because my part in this has come to an end for right now. And so I'm going to kick it off to Sarah, and I'll see you all soon.
Mahalo to our viewers for submitting so many excellent questions and to our panelists for their thoughtful responses. While we have reached the end of Q&A, I encourage you to continue the discussion during open space. To participate in open space, simply remain online and take a seat at any available roundtable for an unmoderated, interactive discussion amongst peers. The center would also like to extend a warm mahalo to our moderator, Ayana, and to our keynote panelists, Pocket, Anna, Shruti, and Marla. The center is honored to host such esteemed women. Thank you as well to our viewers for attending this Gals with Lake Global webinar. We hope today's discussion has left you with a sense of leadership, entrepreneurship, and inspiration. Finally, thank you to our partners, Hub Coworking Hawaii, Under My Umbrella, JWLI Ecosystem, Blue Startups, ASU Global Futures Lab, We Empower, Pacific Business News, Box Jelly, Hawaii Found Her, and Hawaii Venture Capital Association. Join us Thursday, January 20th for our next Gals with Lake Global webinar, and check out our website for webinar information, registration, full speaker bios, and YouTube links at www.eastwestcenter.org/Gals with Lake. And for those of you who wish to meet with today's panelist and moderator, please remember to remain online and join one of the roundtables for open space. Mahalo and see you soon.